So I went to the doctor the other day, and I was filling out the intake forms, and one of the questions on that form was whether or not I had any hobbies and what they were. And so I put down leatherworking, among other things, because I have way too many hobbies, and went about my business and didn't think anything of it. But it happened that the doctor that I was seeing was actually in need of some leather help. So after we got done with the visit, she brought up the leatherworking thing. She said, "Hey, tell me about this." And so I told her about what I'd done. I made a bag that I had with me there, so I showed it to her, and she told me about her upcoming wedding, which is super exciting, and said that she was looking for and had been looking for some time somebody who could engrave or emboss the initials of the best men on these fancy suspenders that she had for their suits. Of course, I'd never done anything like that before, but being me, I volunteered to do it, offered to help, and the rest is history. So she mailed me out these suspenders, and I had to figure out how to do it. I thought the way that you would do this would be with some sort of an adhesive and some kind of a metal foil, but it turns out that's not it at all. And so the way that it usually is done is with a hot stamping machine. And so you have this kind of foil-like stuff where it's plastic on one side and this metal foil on the other, and you heat it up and press it into the shape that you want. And that's how it's done. It turns out that I didn't have the machine, though. And so I went on YouTube to try and find some videos of how you might do this without having the big fancy machine. And I didn't find much. There's one video out there about using a temperature-controlled soldering iron, but it turns out the temperature that you need is pretty low. It's about 200 degrees that you need to get your stamps to in order to make this thing work right. So that wasn't going to work because soldering iron, I couldn't find a soldering iron. I have a couple that would get down to that low of a temperature. Usually it's much, much higher. But I do have a toaster oven, and so it has a temperature thermostat and everything on it. It's very temperature controlled. So my idea is that I could put the letters into the toaster oven, set at around 200 degrees, and experiment a bit to see what the right approach is. So I got some scrap leather and tried this out, and the results actually were pretty good. So the next step in this process was to actually try it out on the actual suspenders, which have this little leather triangle in the back. And so it's going to be a little crowded. It's too narrow to do the letters horizontally, which is how I originally wanted to do it. And so I had to make them vertical. And I found that aligning these letters and getting everything really sort of parallel and perfect was a bit tough. But the real problem that I had at the start was that the leather is actually waxed or something. It's got some sort of a coating on it that makes the foil not stick at all, regardless of what you do. So the first attempt, I pushed down, I heated up the iron, pushed down onto the leather, and sure enough, nothing stuck to the actual letter. And that's because there was this coating of wax on the outside. So I had to clean that off. So I went out to the shop and got some denatured alcohol, which is great for this sort of work as a solvent. It evaporates really, really quickly. And it's not like crazy toxic or something like acetone or nail polish remover or something. So I thought this would be safe for the leather and also do the job of kind of getting this waxy stuff off of there. So I put some into a little squirt bottle here and put on some gloves and stuff so my hands wouldn't smell funny, and then just rubbed it off there. So I'm basically just going over here and just trying to clean off that wax. It turns out that the leather is kind of super absorbent here. So one mistake that I made initially was putting on too much of this acetone. It was kind of soaking into the leather, and then the leather was a bit wet, and I think that's one of the issues that I had. So as I went further in this process, I kind of tried to go a little easier on the acetone so that I could get it clean, but it wouldn't kind of soak in and make it even a little bit soggy. And once I got the wax cleaned off, everything seemed to work much better. So I was able to hot stamp the first letters onto the first set of suspenders. One thing that I did find was that the heat in the iron turns out to be really important. So if you have it too hot, then tons and tons of foil goes off onto the leather, and you have to clean it off with the denatured alcohol. But if you don't have it hot enough, then nothing transfers, and that's actually a much worse problem because then once you lift the stamp up, then you've got to get it exactly right in the exact same place, and if you don't, then you have sort of two letters that are kind of laying on top of each other, and that's not attractive. So I ended up erring on the side of a little bit too much heat. 250 degrees is what I ended up setting the oven to, and that seemed to work pretty well. And you can see me here with the denatured alcohol sort of rubbing off the additional foil that had gotten transferred to the actual back of the leather. This seemed to work pretty well as well. And the first one turned out pretty well. Congratulations, WLD. The next one was a bit of a challenge because it used the same letter twice in a row, and I didn't really wait long enough the first time for that letter to really heat up enough in between the two Ds. So I thought maybe I could do it in one pass, but it's actually pretty remarkable how quickly the letter cools off from 200 degrees down to, 90 degrees or something like that after you use it for the first time. So sorry, TDD. You have the misfortune of having a middle name that starts with the same letter as your last name, and I didn't get it right the first time. So there's a bit of trial and error going on here, and I don't think I got it quite all the way clean, so I have to go through this a couple of times in order to get it to work exactly right. But in the end, it turned out okay. And once I got the heat right, everything else was pretty easy. So here's TRH. And SDI, and GDS, and DFD, and KCS. The last one that I'm going to do is the grooms. And so I hope that this one turns out the very best of all. I've certainly gotten the most practice at this point, so I've done 7 before this, and this is the 8th. So the groom's name actually starts with a D, first name, and last name starts with a D, so I wasn't going to make the same mistake twice when it came to not letting the letters get hot enough. So I did the first D, and then the W came. And then I waited a little while for the D to actually heat back up in the toaster oven, so that it would transfer correctly. So what are the secrets? If you're going to try and do this for the first time, it's actually really easy because everybody's got a toaster oven. You could conceivably use maybe boiling water. It's about the right temperature, 212 degrees. Maybe put a little salt in it or something to make the boiling point go up a bit. Of course, then you have the problem of making sure you get your letters dry so they don't corrode. But getting the temperature right is really important. So if it's too cold, you're going to have a problem. But if it's too hot, you'll melt right through the foil. So right around 225 or so, 250 maybe on the high end is as hot as you want to get. And that's the secret to getting it right. You do want a practice piece, so if you can possibly do it, get a piece of leather that's as similar as possible or maybe identical to the actual leather that you're going to be stamping on. Because the sample piece that I used was really high quality leather that hadn't been treated with any kind of wax or weatherproofing or anything like that. And it worked amazingly well, and it was a lot cleaner than this leather. This leather was actually padded a bit because it had that suspender kind of nylon-y material underneath it. And so it was actually a little bit fuzzier, a little bit messier in terms of the actual finish. The last step in doing all of these suspenders here was to go over the leather again with I used just a snowproofing kind of leather conditioner And that's going to restore that kind of protective finish on it that I took off with the denatured alcohol at the beginning. And so I went ahead and snowproofed or conditioned or treated all the leather again so that it would be nice and safe and hopefully not wear or rub off particularly quickly. So that was the final step in this process. And you just rub that snowproofing on with a soft rag. And here's the finished product. So DWD, I hope you have a great wedding, and congratulations, man. In the end, this was a really, really fun project. I wouldn't recommend starting out like I did with your first kind of real go on something as important as groomsmen's presents, but it is what it is, and it turned out great. There are lots of imperfections, but when you do a project like this, all you can see are the mistakes that you made. And so I'm sure that, especially from a distance, this is going to look really great.